Welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights, a management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Good evening, Lei. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, too, and good evening from my side. My name is Lei Xing. I'm your co-host and former chief editor of China Auto Review. This is episode number 74. So basically, June sales continued Geely's radar launch. Before we begin, update us on your things on the ground and your recent visit to check out the Jidu Robo-1.
Yeah, so...
How was that?
Let me give you guys a quick update on the situation here. Parts of Shanghai are in, well, let's just say there's partial lockdowns in Shanghai. And so I think there is a bit of uneasiness across the entire city. It has not affected any production that I've heard of. And you can also comment on that, you know, with your insiders, Lei. But for now, there are parts that have been locked down for a little bit. But, you know, I had conference calls with two companies yesterday, and they were in their office. No one's wearing masks because I could see them on the Zoom calls and stuff. So it's a little bit weird, to be quite frank. And then in Beijing, things are pretty normal here, although if we want to stay in Beijing, your life is not going to be too uprooted. But it's summertime. Families want to go out on vacation, and families like me would normally go to the United States or go abroad, but we're limited to domestic travel. But certain cities have different COVID restrictions, so that makes it a little bit tricky as well. But on to this week's trip to Baidu. I'd never been to Baidu headquarters, and Jidu, who's located down in Shanghai, had sent up one of their Robo-1s for the employees to kind of have a look at. And so if you can think of a Chinese version of Google's campus in Mountain View, that's kind of what, it's much more conservative. You know, it's not as flashy as the Google headquarters, but that's kind of the feel that you got. And so I was really impressed. Baidu has a huge campus up in Zhongguancun. But so there's a kiosk in the common area in between all of the buildings. And inside this kiosk is the purple Robo-1. And there's two people that are there. They have scheduled times for employees to go in and learn about the car. Now, you're not really supposed to sit in it or touch it or do anything like that, but I cheated. I was lucky. I feel pretty lucky because I think I was one of the few outsiders that, and I don't really consider myself media, to get and take a look at it while it's in Beijing. And initial thoughts about the Robo-1, it's big. It's 5 meters long, so it's not, you know, the size of an X3. It's big. And the first thing I saw was that purple. The purple that you see in the pictures and the videos don't do it justice. You could dive and swim into this purple. It's much better in person. It looks much deeper in person than in pics. I think there's a certain maturity to the design because there's curves, but there isn't this gaudy jewelry that you'll see on EVs in general, but also for Chinese EVs, because there's just not a lot of creases. There's not a lot of additional, for lack of a better way of saying it, jewelry. And you could tell there was a lot of restraint to the design so that the user or the driver can focus on interior-wise on the voice commands and that coast-to-coast screen. For me, the lack of physical knobs and buttons really, really stood out because it's just that screen, a steering wheel, and a center console that is really minimal as well. So as an older person, it was a little uncomfortable to see just reliance on the screen, but I'm probably on the fringe of what their target market is. And, that just means that hardware and software integration that you and I talked to Frank about needs to be on point. If the UX, the user experience that Frank and his team has designed is really going to come through, right?
Yeah. So, by the way, two things. One is, unlike Silicon Valley, where these tech companies have their own campuses, Baidu, I think Sina, Sohu, and a couple of others, they're in this area called the Hochangcun.
Yes.
Which is, it's like a special area for these tech and
Xiaomi is
portal,
there.
Yeah, portal companies, vertical portal companies. So, and two, we're finalizing the editing of our Max episode with Frank Wu, who will talk more about the some of the design philosophy of the no button, and obviously what's going to make it into the production vehicle. He gives some hint as well. So stay tuned for that. I guess we'll try to publish on Monday. Is that correct?
Yeah. So first of all, my
Or a
apologies
bit
to lay
behind.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes. Oh, and a couple other things. The interior is massive. I think one of the things that we can kind of confirm that you and I had talked about already was that the suicide doors weren't going to make it into production.
That was obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, it was a great way to show how large the interior is. I don't think the rear bucket seats are going to make it into production either. So let's see how the rear interior changes because of that. So
yeah. Anyways, so it's nice that you got to look at the concept, at least in person.
Mm-hmm.
And how's the concept in terms of, I know we shouldn't be talking about build quality on a concept, but did it feel, I don't know if you got a chance to touch and feel.
I'll give you an example. I walked in with probably 12 employees, Baidu employees, and they gave us this 5, 6, 7 minute overview. This woman, she kind of gave us a good grounding and understanding of the concept, the actual vehicle, and I understood about 70% of it. So it was great. And then they all left, and I got to stay for a little bit, taking some pictures, taking some videos, and they showed me there was a use case of a man, let's say it's a man driving the Robo-1 from work to home. And that screen, it was basically just a video of all the changes and everything that was going on in the vehicle, but acted out in the screen. And so I recorded that and I will post it. And that's what I was asking you about the zimu, right? Or the subtitles, Lei, because I think, again, even the UX on the coast to coast screen was very seamless, where I think earlier iterations and tries for that stuff is a little clunky, but the voice command has to work in order for this to get where they need it to be. But to answer your question, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, the build quality was actually really good. So nobody was in there, and I was like trying to lean my arm in to take a picture of the IP from the rear. And then they were like, "You're not supposed to go sit in it, but go ahead and get in." And so I got in there, and I was just touching and feeling stuff. And even for a concept, I was very delicate, but for a concept, it was pretty solid. So I think they're, Frank had said they're pretty close to almost being production ready. So I saw and felt that in the car. The panel gaps were pretty consistent, and I checked, and the paint was consistent, because even on production vehicles, when I've gone into a Neo and stuff, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's a concept car, so we really shouldn't be talking about these things. But still, I'm just trying to get a feel of just the quality. Because some concepts I've seen at auto shows, they're poorly.
Oh, so poor. You can see the glue, but I think that's Frank's experience working at a major automaker, a foreign automaker, and probably not accepting those types of small details and mistakes, right?
Yeah. And, perhaps we can go into, you remind me, this is another topic we can talk a little bit about, which is the HMI, the whatever, this part of the competition is really cutthroat. And I guess the quote of the week was from William Li, CEO of NIO, responding basically to Zeekr's free upgrade of the 8155 chip. And he just bluntly said in that group chat, and he says, we have 200,000 customers, and it's going to cost us 2 billion RMB, and I just can't afford to do it. Whereas the Zeekr, they just absorbed that 300 million RMB cost and say, we're going to upgrade it for free. And the reason being is the first customers, there were a lot of complaints on things not working as smooth because of this cockpit interaction, and it was slow, right? Certain, apps or touching the screen and swiping the screen, things like that. So this was a big chatter, I think, last week on how tough, how competition is just the Chinese word is juan, which is involuted.
Yes.
That people get sucked into this competition. If you don't do this, then the expectations, why? Because a few episodes ago we talked about the 2022 versions of the 3 existing models of NIO, but you have to pay a little bit to upgrade to the newer chip, right? 8155. Yep. So I thought that was interesting, and just how competition is just, yeah.
For our new listeners, let's give a history lesson on that Zeekr 001, because it wasn't a Zeekr, it was a Lynk & Co. car to begin with. And the second thing is that it's Geely. So Geely is not a tech company. William Li started a tech company. So he looks at these things completely differently than the product team at Zeekr. Okay.
Yeah.
You can hire software people and tech people, but if the process or product development process is being driven by car people, the car is going to be different for sure, right?
Yeah, and that's why. Is this a chip problem? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's more of an integration and manufacturing built problem, because there's others that also have this older Snapdragon chip for the cockpit, and they work fine. So Zeekr, right? It's a new brand, a new positioned performance kind of positioned EV. So this is where customers' expectations are so important nowadays, that if you don't meet certain expectations, they will revolt against you.
And that's that old saying, you get one chance to make a first impression, right?
And so Zeekr, I think, made it up by paying 300 million to get that kind of reputation back. That's how it is. And William is like, we can't do it. We
And that was a poke. That was a poke. That was definitely a poke. That wasn't him being modest. That was him poking at Zeekr. The other thing that I really want to quickly mention is our expectations are set by our mobile handset and tablet ecosystem. So we get instant latency or instant reaction and feedback on our tablets and our phones. So the same expectation. And I don't think customers will think, okay, I should expect something different while I'm in the car versus when I'm using my phone. But it's the car company's designers' jobs to bridge that difference, right? And if they're not doing a good job of it, then they'll know about it very quickly.
Yeah, and there's also some other recent issues stemming from what were promised on paper versus what were actually delivered, causing some complaints from customers of other brands, right? So these things they happen. So back on sales, I think we pretty much talked about sales last episode, but
Yep.
right, these recent numbers that came out from CPCA and CAAM just kind of solidify my belief that the China's NEV market is strong, it's resilient, you can't underestimate it, really. Always surprises you how strong it can come back. And that's what happened in June.
And this is so setting aside the lockdown and the production issues and the lumpiness on some of that stuff. This is the strength in the market is a combination of the diminishing subsidies, but also the competition, the products. And if there wasn't a lot of competition and a lot of products to choose from, there wouldn't be pricing pressure to keep prices affordable or competitive. Okay. And so if there are only a handful of EVs in the market, they could price them pretty high and not feel the pain of a competitor undercutting them. But the competition is so fierce across different segments. So that, along with, I think the subsidies play a little role, but the incentives for goosing the market because of the lockdown, I think that's also helping. But generally speaking, it's those two or three levers.
Yeah, and this year in particular, we have the extra, though quite a few or a majority of the brands have raised EV prices.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't think we talked about this, that, this is not going to affect demand. And we have this extra stimulus nationally and locally on purchase of NEVs. And although the ICE purchase tax, half of the purchase tax policies in place, that'll take a little bit of share away, but it's right, EV sales, they're going to remain strong until the end of the year. And we saw some of the penetration, I mean, in the Chinese brands, I think they were like 40% or something already.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very high. And in particular, that long photo of the rankings based on different price segments,
yeah,
I think that was a perfect, that was done by Neo, by the way.
Yeah.
So that gave you a quick look at the kind of the competitive landscape. And if you look at those price segments where the foreign legacy, either the mass brands or the premium brands are, they are just, right, they're way behind. And the 200,000 and below, if you look at those models, there is not a single foreign brand in there.
Right.
I think those were the top 10 or 15 brands. And then especially the hi-fi one that they posted, right? We had some discussion with Abe. And also the 400,000 and above, right? Neo has two on the list, leading that one. And if you look at the Audis and the Mercedes in a few hundred units, right? So they have so much to catch up if they want to be in the top 3 or top 5.
And let's not forget that they've never been behind looking at someone's back trying to chase them in the China market generally. So this is a completely different position for the German automakers, because let's be real. The luxury automakers have been dominated. The luxury market, the premium segment, has been dominated by the German car makers for the last 25 years here in China. The ABB, right? And so this is completely new and uncomfortable territory for them. And they've just been generally caught flat-footed because, as you pointed out, if we look at different price points, the top 3 or 4 are normally going to be occupied by Chinese domestic brands. And if you think about it, the premium segment above 500,000, you would think that's what they would own, but it's hi-fi that is number one for at least June, right? So
yeah, I think also the pace of either these new brands or new models that are launched is just relentless.
Oh my God.
That the foreign brands, they can't keep up. Look at, right, these past few weeks. What have we been talking about?
And this is probably challenging for the foreign automakers because they're global. And so the cadence at, product development and new features in China outpaces what is probably the right speed in Europe and the United States. So maybe I anticipate perhaps the opposite problem. The Chinese EV first companies entering Europe and the United States and having to slow down their constant updates that they need to. So working at two speeds in multiple different regions is really challenging, I think, right? From a management standpoint.
Yeah, and I think just today we've heard news that, let's say, the Nissan Leaf is going to be discontinued, and also possibly the EQC might be discontinued, right? You saw that, right?
Yep.
And then I think the only, let's say, in the 200 to 300,000 range, I know the ID.6s are respectable, right? A few thousand units. Other than that, right, the Mustang Mach-E, when that number came out, 3,500 units for the first half of 2022, wasn't what we were expecting.
No, I think that's extremely low,
Well,
and I don't think it's a production issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's chip supply problems, but I don't know. And then you have BYD is supplying some of the batteries, but BYD's also got to take care of their own.
Speaking of BYD, in August, they're going to be increasing monthly output to 300,000 units a month.
Yeah, that number I can't even fathom because
woo, that is a wild number.
Because 300,000 units, a few years ago, China sells 300,000 units NEVs a year.
So I sent you the link to that article where the Minsheng securities analyst said that for the foreseeable future, until likely we get into a 50% penetration rate in China for NEVs. Now, again, NEVs includes PHEVs, BEVs, and HCEVs, generally speaking. He said that we'll continue to see double-digit growth. So that bodes well for BYD, because if we're at 50% penetration, that means that almost 11 million vehicles a year are going to be NEVs, right, before the market slows.
So the first half CAAM numbers were 2.6 million. That's 120% growth. And let's say China does 6 million this year. And let's cut that 120% in half. Let's say 50%. 6 million at 50% growth will get you to 9 million.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So we can look forward to 2023 now, that the possibility of China selling 10 million units is very...
It's not out of reach.
No, it's within reach. The other number I think was important to point out is Chinese export. So the 2.6 million units include some export. And I think CAAM said first half NEV export was around 200,000 units.
Okay.
Last year, it was 300,000 units, the official number.
Right.
So I think, we can probably expect close to 500,000 NEVs exported.
Again.
Okay, right?
So that number is actually, to me, low, but it's because that the production issues meant that they wanted to accommodate domestic customers before export customers. And I think 2021 numbers for the entire year were about 550,000 exported. So not a ton of growth if we get to 500,000 or 600,000 units exported for the end of 2022. But again, the priority is going to be the China domestic market for most of these automakers. I
think how the second half turns out really dependent on, aside from the COVID outbreaks, the disruptions, chips, are these policies and the announcement of that, potential announcement of the extension of the purchase tax exemption policy. Right. When that is announced, could affect how strong the market performs. Sometimes if it's late in the year, okay, then people will think that it's going to end at the end of the year, then there will be a push. But so that'll affect. But 6 million, I think it's entirely it's going to happen.
I'm going to talk about two things that I just thought of because of that 10 million number that we just threw out for 2023, Lei. That means that every EV company is going to be fighting for raw materials, going to fight for batteries, going to be fighting for chips. Okay. More capacity should come online, but that could also make costs rise. 10 million is just a mind-bogglingly large number. And I think there could be some challenges just securing, if you're a foreign automaker who isn't producing a lot of vehicles, then for a supplier, you're going to be lower on their tier of importance for supplying parts to. So if China EV Inc. is hoovering up most of that capacity, then it could leave the foreign automakers out in the cold in 2023 as well. So,
well, obviously we can't expect 120% growth every year because that base number gets bigger and bigger. So 6 million, a 50% growth is very significant. Then let's say this year it grows 100%, right?
The second thing I wanted to mention was that this market is growing. And so we have, and you know this, like, we haven't even really seen competition because everybody's eating, everybody's selling. Now, because of weak product, companies are losing out on sales volume, but not because in a mature automotive market, in order to grow your sales, you have to take it from somebody else. And so customer acquisition costs increase, and that's when real competition starts. And so we haven't even seen or felt the bare knuckle brawling that is going to happen once that growth rate gets to low double digits or even single digits. So, currently I feel everyone's eating, right? If your product is not competitive in the market, that's just market economics taking care of that, right? But let's say you have some great products in the market and the only real way to differentiate is branding and pricing. And we know, Lei, that's the MO of the automotive sector when in mature markets, right?
So next we
radar?
go to radar. Yeah. What's on your radar?
So what do you think?
No,
what are your
the first thing I thought, isn't there a watch brand called Rado that's also Leda in Chinese?
Yes, Rado. Yep. I don't know what it's called in Chinese, but it's called Rado or Rado. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Geely, more brands that they can conjure up.
Yeah, and I feel that they're almost taking it too literally, that they want to create economies of scale with their SEA platform, and so they're creating different top hats. But the brand management is going to be really important for Geely, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that they launched this just as China is on this wave of outdoor lifestyle, camping. I don't know whether this was a coincidence or how they planned this, right? It seems the right time to launch this brand if they were branded that way.
Right.
And we were trading messages with Frank on some of the design, styling, and I guess the front design of the radar was rather close to some other
mirror image,
mirroring some other brands. But I guess this wasn't like a Jidu Robo-1. I think the radars, the RD6 design was a bit bland. It didn't jump out as like a Rivian, right? Rivian, you have that very strong stance with the headlights. It was just a electric pickup, but it was all about this. In that press conference, it was all about this outdoor lifestyle and utility, functionality, all that.
And Americans know that this is like a Ford Ranger size pickup, not an F-150 size pickup. So it's
Maverick?
almost, Yeah,
Ranger,
a Ford
Maverick.
Ford Maverick. Yep, exactly. So it's much smaller than the F-150. And so when I believe that when Americans think pickup, the first thing they think of is F-150. So
I think this also the launch of this radar brand follows this trend over the recent years where companies are diving into very niche, not niche, but very specific segments. So the examples are the Aura, right? This is a brand dedicated to female
yep,
buyers. Let's say a tank, Great Wall's tank, this kind of macho off-road style, right? And then the hi-fi. Hi-fi is basically this ultra premium,
connected, edgy.
positioned, and now you have this radar. And we still haven't heard from Great Wall has the other brand, the Salon, and
Yes.
BYD is launching that supposedly off-road premium brand, right? So these are brands going into very specific segments that we've never really thought could be a market before, and now they're almost, you know, generating these market on their own. That something that didn't exist before that they made it.
I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but this outdoor domestic travel trend also coincides with COVID because 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the commercials you saw on TV were probably jet setting, going to other countries, trip.com. Hey, go to Rome, go here, go there. But now, I don't know if one was created by the other, but I'd mentioned in an earlier podcast that pollution has improved significantly in a lot of the tier 1 and tier 2 cities here in China. So I think that's also a reason for the outdoor stuff. But
yeah, and also the policy landscape with the recent elimination of the used vehicles not being able to be transferred across cities and provinces. That's been lifted. The use of pickups in cities, how that's going to change, right? And the lifestyle part of it.
You can bet that Li Shufu in the next Congress is going to be pushing for more liberal acceptance of pickups on major gaosus, right?
And Geely, remember, they do have a commercial vehicle group. They still have that huge heavy duty truck that we haven't, that the concept that they revealed that they're going to get into.
We should also remind people of a couple things. First of all, that Wuling Hongguang Mini EV came out of nowhere, right? There was no use case for that previously.
Right.
So, and the second thing is, first thing, now that sells 35, like clockwork, 35,000 units a month. The second thing is because China is the world's largest passenger vehicle market, these niche vehicles can still sell 100, 200,000 units a month or a year. So, whereas a niche vehicle in a smaller market in Europe or the US market might not have the volume to merit such a specific vehicle for a specific use case, in China, if it's popular enough, you could probably sell 10, 12,000 of those a month. So,
yeah. And they're just creating these new segments. That's right. And we Xpeng is betting on flying cars. They just got a new investment.
Yeah, I saw that.
$100 million investment on that entity.
Which is completely weird because that's only going to be a foreign market thing.
And by the way, Geely is also doing this with the Terrafugia and their investor in Volocopter. And we saw our good friend Roger posting that Daniel Kircher has gone to a eVTOL startup.
Yes. So for those who are wondering who Daniel Kircher is, he's an ex-BMW, or is it?
Infinity, BMW, China guy.
Hongcher, Baidu, and then
co-founder and president of Baidu, yep.
Then he went down to the Evergrande Hongcher, and then he moved back to Germany, it looks like, and is now a co-founder or executive at a startup eVTOL company in Germany. So I think that's a really, really unique situation because most of these eVTOL companies are only going to be able to sell outside of China. So, anything else?
That's it. I think other outside of China, just tons of news over here on batteries and charging, right? GM working with EVgo and Pilot on that highway charging route. Panasonic is in the news, right?
Yeah. So Nori wrote that article about Panasonic gaining efficiency on their battery. So some good clarification from Nori on that. And then really quickly, Lei, let me go through my global roundup real quick. Congratulations. First of all, goes to Hao Tai-tang, who announced that he'll be retiring. He's a young guy out of Ford, an executive, one of the executive managers. And I look up to him because he's Vietnamese American. I think he has a similar story to my family. And so it's disappointing that he's leaving Ford because he's one of the few Asian, specifically Vietnamese executives that I know of in a foreign automaker. So, but I'm sure he's going to be landing somewhere very soon, and I'll keep track of him.
Oh, you can bet that retirement, you put an asterisk on that retirement. you can bet he'll show up somewhere else. Yeah,
yes.
He's just too young to retire, I think.
Yep. And then next, Tom Zhu is now the vice president of Asia Pacific for Tesla.
Yeah,
he was promoted. It's effectively it's a title change and not much else, I don't think, because everything revolves around the China operations in Asia, right?
I remember attending an event back in, I think, 2015 when Tesla opened one of their showrooms in Beijing near that Wanda Plaza.
Yes.
Near,
yep.
Right?
Near Dawanglu and stuff?
Yeah, second or third showrooms in Beijing or something.
Yep.
He was there, and I think he was in charge of charging infrastructure. So he's come a long way.
Yeah. The rumor has it is that he's tireless. He's one of those 4 or 5 hours a night sleeping kind of guys. He slept in Shanghai Giga during early parts of the restart of production during the lockdown. And
so Elon must be, I guess he was referring to him, huh? When he said the Chinese people.
Yeah. So Mobileye delayed their IPO. So Intel's financial gratification is also delayed. And I think that Mobileye is having some challenges. So with growth. So keep an eye on what they're doing because companies like Qualcomm, Nvidia, they're not slowing down, and we should start seeing more penetration in China, at least from companies like Horizon and Black Sesame. So that's going to leave a few of the foreign chip manufacturers or hardware software stacks for autonomous vehicles kind of odd men out. And then
Karpathy leaving Tesla, right? That's all the chatter now.
Yeah. And the two more things. I'm starting to see a ton of ET7s on the roads here in Beijing.
It's about time.
They do have a presence, and the small wheels kind of look weird. So if you're going to get an ET7, you should definitely go for at least the 20 or 21 inch wheels or whatever.
Yeah. Look for that ES7 to get onto that sales ranking list above 400,000 pretty soon. I think.
Right.
Right.
So I think we've mentioned that I'm going to be in Detroit for the auto show. And this week, Time Magazine named Detroit as one of the world's greatest places.
That makes me want to check out Detroit more now.
And I did, because I posted that in my newsletter, and I got some hate, from my friends, like my European friends. It's like, dude, whatever, man. So, you can hate on Detroit, and then, anyways, but I'm looking forward to coming back because it's going to be an exciting time. So,
but you can really feel, me being here, what's going on in the West is definitely, waking up and trying to catch up to what's going on in the East. Right, throughout the value chain.
And I think just to touch on why we and most people who have listened to us before know this, why we started this podcast is because I don't really care if you're in the US, Europe, or China. You don't have to physically be here, but you need to really understand what's going on. And I just don't feel a lot of the analysts and media until recently have really even tried. They just, anytime you talk about Tesla, if you don't talk about China, you don't know what you're talking about. Global business for Tesla, right? It just boggles my mind. And the FT over last weekend did a deep dive, 2 articles within 2 days or 3 days of BYD. I mean, these are the types of things that are creating the awareness, and hopefully we're helping, right, Lei? I feel that we are helping.
And BYD is about to make some huge announcements, I think, come later this year or early next year.
Yeah, so are we going to go, if I'm still there, are we going to go to the LA Auto Show and CES too then, Lei?
I'll be there. Yeah, and next week, I guess it's a week from today, it's Baidu World. You're going, I suppose?
Yes, so they're going to have a small live update from the Yizhuang Depot. And I think I've been invited to the Yizhuang Depot. So that'll be cool. That'll be my second time this year going to the depot. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.